Alright guys, in this video what I'd like to talk about is relays. And I got a couple relays. These are the ones that should be on your trainers, okay? Now the big difference between these two relays is one is a single pull and one is a double pull. So we're going to really be focusing on the single pull right now in this video, and then there's going to be an activity where we're going to use this double pull. So hopefully you'll get a really good idea about how that works later on. But let's kind of go over what we have here. Now, a relay is a magnetic switch. That's all it is. It's a magnet that turns on and off a circuit. Now, the actual relay, the physical being you have right here, is going to be the actual relay, which will be this part. This is your relay. And you can actually see, if you get really close, there's this electromagnetic electromagnet right here, and that's actually what's pulling that switch over. Okay, so we're going to be getting power to this electric magnet right here, and there's going to be a switch inside here that's getting tripped. And there's actually a manual right here, and I don't know if we're going to be able to see it very well if I kind of click it back and forth. Can you see this contact down here, how it's moving back and forth? Alright, see, that's the actual switch inside there. So this is the relay. Now this right here, this is the relay holder, and this one actually has a locking mechanism, and it has all your terminals that are going to go to certain areas on our relay. If you look at the bottom, you can see that there's a bunch of spade connectors, and these are all attached to a specific terminal right here. So let's go ahead and let's draw some of these up on the board, and let's talk about how a relay actually works. Alright, so like I was saying, a relay is an electromagnetic switch. Now I'm going to draw you two different styles of electromagnets, and then we're going to kind of erase one of them. So now the main one that you're going to see in automotive is going to look like this, and it'll have like a kind of a sideways line to it. And then it'll have two electrical wires coming off that. And then there's going to be what terminal number it might be. Now I'm going to be using A1 and A2 because that's very popular in the relays that we're going to be working with. That's not always true, especially with this one being one that is out of automotive. It'll probably not have an A1, A2. It'll have like a 56 or something like that. So we're just going to use A1, A2 because that's what we need to know. Now you're also going to see some of these electromagnets that are going to be drawn like a coil, okay? And they'll be drawn something like this. And then they'll have again, the A1 or the A2 right here. Again, this is an electromagnet, this is an electromagnet. This one is just kind of showing you that it's a coil. This one is the actual symbol for an electromagnet. And you'll actually see these electromagnet symbols all over the place. You'll see them on the side of air valves and stuff like that to be used as like a solenoid. So we're going to take this electromagnet and we're going to use it to open and close the switch. Alright, so now from this electromagnet, we're going to have what they would call a mechanical lever, and those will be drawn as a dashed line. Now this lever is going to pull on a switch, so I'm going to draw that switch right here. And then this one will actually have its own terminals, and this one might be 9 and 1 or something like that, let's say. So what will happen is we apply voltage to A1, A2. It's going to move this magnet and it's going to suck down this magnet or this mechanical arm. So it's going to cause that normally open switch to go ahead and go closed. So if we were to draw this in an actual circuit, we might have our power source, our positive over here, and it might go into a light over here that'll then come back to a ground. Hopefully you guys can see that. So if that makes sense, we're going to come from the power to a normally open switch. When we apply voltage right here to this A1, A2, it's going to close the switch, turn on the light. Now you might be asking, well, how do we control the A1, A2? Well, this will be another circuit, and it'll actually have a manual switch on it. So there'll be more of a manual switch out here. So we'll have this one going over to another power source, and then this one can just go out to a ground again. So we press this button, and then this right here will close, turning on our light. Now why is this so much more complicated than maybe just pressing the light or pressing the button down to turn the light on? Well, not everything can be run that way, and this is really to be running much more complicated circuits. So we're going to be using it really basic right now, and then hopefully by the end of this class, you guys will be doing some more complicated circuits where you'll kind of understand why we use relays. So what I'd like to do now is I want to draw the symbols for this little relay right here and kind of get an idea of how this one works, so that way when we go out and do our first few activities, you kind of understand. All right, now I don't know if you can really see it, but you can kind of see the coil there on the bottom, and then you can see some lines up here. So if you've got one of these, you should go grab it, kind of look at it while we're talking about it, so that way you can see what I'm talking about. So let's go ahead, I'm gonna just make this bigger up on the whiteboard for you. So the first thing we're gonna have our line coming over, and then it's gonna go into a coil. We're gonna have it look something like this. Now, it does have an A1 and an A2 here, but it also has in parentheses a 14, actually the A1, A2 is in parentheses, but it doesn't really matter, and then the 13. So these parentheses are what they're saying is this is the number that goes onto our terminal block. So if we were gonna hook up this relay and we wanted to put the coil power on, we would use terminal 13 or 14 or A1 and A2. Not all terminals have an A1, A2, not all terminal blocks have a 13 and a 14. So that's why they're giving you multiple options depending on what terminal block you buy. Because this is not the only relay holder, I should be calling it, that you can buy for this relay. So let's continue on. Now this is where it gets kind of tricky because they don't do that mechanical line showing you how this one works. What they do is they've got this as a terminal that comes in, and this one will have a 9 or in parentheses an 11. It will then come up into a switch. Now their switches are drawn a little bit different. They're kind of drawn like this, and this one's going to have a 1. Let me just make this 1 with a 12, and then there's going to be a 6, a 5, and a 14. All right, so this is the symbol that you're going to see on the side of the small relay right here. Now what's happening is, right now there's a normally closed circuit right here. So from 9 to 1, it's normally closed. That way, so if I hooked up a light here that went to a ground and I hooked up power here to number 9, it would go through the circuit and power that light. Now if I applied voltage to A1, A2, what would happen is this switch would go from here and it would click down, and all of a sudden there would be power on our 5 or 14 terminal. And that's all that the relay is really doing. Now, when I talk about how this relay, the small one, is different than the big one, it's because the big one is considered a double pole, meaning there's multiple switches in there. So it's not just this one switch like this, or it could be, you know, upwards of like a 4-pole or something like that if it has multiple switches that are happening inside there. But otherwise, this is the concept that you need to try to get. We apply power to the coil, it's going to pull in that electromagnet, which is going to cause a magnetic arm to come up here, and it's going to pull that switch down. But it's very important to understand that right now we have a normally open circuit, so we could hook up something to a normally open circuit. So if there's multiple relays, so you know, as soon as we're connecting 9 to a power, something could be turned on. So if we wanted to have, as soon as the system was armed, let's say, there was power going to number 1, which would be a power ready light or something like that, we could have that happen. And then we could have, when we actually turn the motor on, it could have motor running light based off of number 5. Okay? So hope that kind of clears some things up. We're going to be doing a lot of labs with this, so hopefully you can kind of get a pretty good understanding. So go ahead and let's continue on and let's get started on those labs.